Hep B that you get at birth. There's really no need for that.
Welcome, Waddlers. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Kristian, and this is A Waddling Truth.
Today we're talking about something that quietly becomes one of the biggest parts of pregnancy: advocacy. We hear this all the time. I just don't feel like I have a trusting relationship with my provider. And most of the time, it's not personal. You don't see the same provider every visit. Things get ordered without explanation. Different providers say different things, and that's frustrating. So let me say this clearly. If you don't understand what your provider is saying, ordering, or suggesting, it's okay to ask why. You don't have to leave confused. You don't have to figure it out later. Appointments are rushed, yes, so write your questions down and bring them with you. Providers should be able to explain what they're doing, and if you ever feel unsure about a medication, especially an over-the-counter one, ask the pharmacist. That's their job. Advocacy isn't conflict, it's clarity. And if it already feels overwhelming, you're already doing it.
Advocacy starts earlier than most people expect. It starts the moment you realize decisions suddenly carry more weight. You're dead scrolling on TikTok, late at night, second guessing, trying to understand things no one ever taught you. Advocacy doesn't begin because you feel confident. It begins because you care. If advocacy starts this early, how does it grow from here?
One of your first advocacy role is finding a provider and navigating insurance. Suddenly, you're an adult making the calls. You're the one asking unfamiliar questions, learning new terms, trying to figure out what's covered and what isn't. For the first time, you're not being scheduled for. You're scheduling yourself, and that shift is hard. Why does this moment feel empowering and overwhelming at the same time?
Asking questions does not make you difficult. Healthcare moves fast, but that does not cancel your right to understand. You are not a burden for wanting clarity about your body and your baby. Advocacy is participation, and participation leads to better care. So what happens when you don't feel heard?
Sometimes advocacy is noticing discomfort. Maybe you feel rushed. Maybe you feel unheard. Maybe something just feels off. You're allowed to trust that. You're allowed to speak up, and you're allowed to change providers. Choosing someone you trust is not dramatic. It's being responsible. But what if speaking up feels hard?
Sometimes advocacy sounds shaky. Sometimes it sounds like, can you ask this for me? Borrowing somebody else's voice still counts. A partner, a friend, a nurse who takes their time with you. Advocacy grows, and it doesn't have to start strong. So what does advocacy look like during birth?
Birth is where advocacy becomes very real. Consent matters, explanations matter, respect matters. Advocacy doesn't mean everything goes as planned. It means your voice still counts even when things feel vulnerable. And once the baby is here, does it stop?
After birth, advocacy expands. It's questions about feedings, recovery, and mental health. It does expand, honestly, because you now are talking about vaccinations. Sometimes you don't want to vaccinate your baby. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you want to delay it. Those are just an example of advocacy after the baby is born. You still deserve care, and speaking up for yourself and your baby still matters. So how long does advocacy last?
Parenthood means long-term advocacy in doctor's office, in schools, in moments where children can't speak for themselves. So this also goes for when your baby's born and if you feel like they're not breathing right, or if you notice that your baby is just not doing what you feel is right, go with your gut feeling. And in schools, when you feel like your child is falling behind, it is okay to ask for testing to see if they have ADHD or autism, anything to get them help. Advocacy is going to be there way past the time they're 18. So that role starts now.
Yeah, sometimes it means advocating for your child when they're having a baby. This goes for grandmas. Alicia, what's a way that you advocated for your babies when you were pregnant?
When I was pregnant, I would say one of the ways that I advocated was because I was pregnant with them during a time when COVID was out there. And with one of my babies, they required getting an NST done every week. And then with my next baby, they did not require it. And because I felt like that was really weird, I requested them to do at least a couple NSTs to make sure everything was okay. Because one pregnancy said it was going to cause heart problems, but then by the time I got pregnant 6 months later, they didn't think so. So to ease my comfort, I requested the testing. What about you?
So, in my pregnancies, I would say the way that I advocated for myself was I had originally, with my fourth pregnancy, had decided to go to a birth center. When I had my anatomy scan, they found that she was measuring smaller, and I felt pretty uncomfortable with that because she was pretty little. It was pretty close to 10th percentile, which, if you guys don't know, if your baby falls under 10 percentile, while in the room, they are technically considered IUGR or interuterine growth restriction. And while my baby wasn't diagnosed with that, I felt very uncomfortable after I had my second and my third ultrasound, and she was still measuring or under the 15 percentile. I decided I didn't feel comfortable going to birth center any longer, so I had swapped back to a regular provider.
Do you feel like the reason why you swapped to another provider in a hospital setting was because if they needed NICU and stuff, they were right there versus having to be going from one place to being transferred?
Yes, that's exactly why, actually, because I thought, well, if she does happen to be smaller and need a little extra care, we'll be somewhere where they can immediately take care of her. I would just prefer to be safe than sorry.
Mhm. So my question to you now is, how do you feel like you advocated during your birth?
Oh, that's a good one. So during my labor with Baylor, I wanted to go unmedicated, and I had prepped for a very long time to go unmedicated. In fact, Josh and I had a code word for the epidural during my labor. I wanted to be able to move as much as I could. So I had told them immediately, I don't want to be hooked up to monitors. I want the monitors that I can move around with. And they really gave me a really hard time about it. I ended up not needing it because I gave birth to her within 2 hours. So all of that was total drama. But I did get my wireless monitors because I insisted on it because I wanted to labor in the best way I knew how. And the best way I knew how was to not be hooked up to things and to be able to move as much as I could. How about you, Alicia?
So I will say one of the avocations that I can think of during birth wasn't even me advocating for myself. It was my husband that actually stood up. So I had a very traumatic birth with my third son, and I fully blame it on the provider and the nursing staff. This is coming from a medical standpoint. The higher up is who's in charge of the team. So that's why I blame her, because she should have been taking charge. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, I was very adamant that I did not want this doctor. I told my husband, I do not want this doctor touching my baby. Do not want her around. Well, when I gave birth to my daughter, I was actually in labor with her for a week. And so I was miserable. I was tired. I was done. So when my water finally broke with her, we went to the hospital, and they said that that certain provider was the only doctor there. And I was so tired that I didn't even care. I was like, whatever. And my husband stood up and said, absolutely not. Call the on-call doctor. He put his foot down. He said, bring the other doctor in here, or we'll go somewhere else. And I will always appreciate the fact that he knew exactly what I wanted. He stood up for me when I just didn't really care anymore.
Going off of that, what is another way that you advocated for your kids after they've been born?
For my kids, if I feel like there's something going on with them, like if they're sick or if I feel that they need to be seen for something, I'm very big on asking all the questions. I will write them down. If you're saying it's one thing versus what I think, I need you to explain it to me and tell me why. As for my oldest child, the way I advocate for him, he is autistic. For the last 17 years, me and my husband have been his voice. We are the ones that stand up for him. We fight for him every day to get what we feel like he deserves, but we also do teach him how to speak up for himself. He's getting to be very big on standing up for himself. Part of our advocation is teaching our kids that. What about you?
I'd say a lot of my advocation comes from I don't vaccinate my kids. And so in the first year, especially with Jocelyn, I had to advocate very hard for her as to why I thought she didn't need them. It felt like it was a battle every time I would go to the doctor's office. If I had to take her to the hospital for whatever reason, it felt like people were judging me, which they were. It was a different time. Nowadays, it feels like there's a few people that aren't vaccinating anymore, but that was the way I had to advocate for my children. And so it was kind of hard. It was a hard decision to make, and it was a hard thing to put into practice because I am very non-confrontational. And so it was difficult for me. I would say that my first was the hardest, and I had to advocate very hard for her to not get vaccinated, especially in the hospital. They're so used to vaccinating babies immediately. I was very against that, and so that was something I did.
Do you make all your decisions based off of research, talking to people, or are you mostly just research and you go with what your gut is telling you?
It's kind of a combination of everything, if I'm honest. I do research through the CDC. I do research through death counts versus, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I go off of personal experiences. I go off of ingredients in the vaccines and weigh the options on whether I think that one's worth it or not.
No, I was just wondering where, because I think it's fascinating that people, when they use their research, I think it's really good when you can do research and you make educational decisions, because I do feel like there's a lot of people that will make decisions based off of just something that they heard versus actually doing the research as to why you don't want to do it.
Yeah, when I was pregnant, I was constantly doing research. I mean, constantly. I mean, there's been many times in which I've had to go back and forth and do it again. And am I doing the right thing here? And every time I land on the same thing, and I can't do it. I don't blame anybody for doing what they think is best for their children. I mean, just for example, Hep B that you get at birth, there's really no need for that. If the mother tests negative, which they do test the mother, the vaccine's not needed for my personal experience. I just never found that to be worth it. My kids don't go to daycare either. I think if my kids went to daycare from like 6 weeks, I think I would think very differently about vaccines, especially the ones that they get at their 2-month or whatever. I think very differently about those because a lot of the vaccines that you get at that point, it's for them because they're so little and it's supposed to protect them. But my kids aren't around other kids to really be exposed to those things, right? Whereas like if your kid's in daycare, it's different.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really interesting path that you chose, because I'm completely opposite. I vaccinate my kids from the time they're in the hospital, so I just think it's very interesting.
Did you vaccinate based on your research as well? Or did you vaccinate just based on like the doctors told you to?
My research was all what I had learned in school. So when I learned about different vaccines and why they're giving it, and um, I think mine comes from a very medical based, just because that's what I learned in school. You learn why you get it. You learn why it's beneficial. I felt like that gave me enough knowledge to feel comfortable with it.
I also think we came from very different backgrounds as far as starting our families. Like with Jaden, you had a lot of things happen where you were scared with him that you didn't really like you wanted to do everything by the books with
Mhm.
him. Plus it was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think we both come from very different points of view as far as it goes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the way we
No,
parent.
I mean,
So
we don't get our kids the COVID vaccine or, the flu shot. My husband is very heavily against it. My husband, he hasn't gotten any vaccines since he got out of the military. He won't, he
yeah.
refuses to. So, I think it's just like, I respect everybody's decision. I'm not, the only people that I can control and take care of are my own children, and I'm going to do what I feel is right. And when they turn 18, if they disagree with it, they can go on their own path. But I think we can agree that every mom just does what they can.
I do actually have a question for you. So you said did you say your kids get RSV really bad?
The boys do.
Did they get the RSV vaccine?
Well, no, because when they were born, there was it was backed up. They couldn't order it.
Hmm.
And then when I got pregnant with my daughter, it was still on back order, but by the time I was pregnant with her, they offered it for pregnant women. So I got it when I was pregnant with her. And the only reason why I will hold true on that decision is because the week I brought her home, both of my toddlers had RSV, and she was home with me, and all the doctors were like, "We gotta keep her away from," I'm like, "I can't. They're 2 and 3 years old, like, they don't understand." And they were around her, they slept near her, they gave her kisses and everything, and she, to this day, knock on wood, she has never gotten it. So, I will say that my daughter, she is the first child that I have had that has been on a delayed schedule just because they've been so backed up on vaccines, and it has made me very uncomfortable, but I've never been on that schedule before, so I've always been very on top of it, and I do think that was the fear that I had when I was younger, was that if my kids didn't get this vaccine on time, they could get really, really sick. With my daughter, it's shown me that with her being on a delayed schedule, she's built a very good immune system, so I've gotten a lot better understanding of people that choose not to, because
Yeah.
I've been kind of forced to live in it.
Yeah. Right.
Now, was there a way that you felt like you had to advocate for yourself personally while you were pregnant? Like you?
Yes, but honestly, I had something scary happen to me. Nothing really came of it. I spent the last 10 weeks of my pregnancy with my fourth begging doctors to figure out what was wrong with me because it felt so wrong. Honestly, nothing ever came of it other than me just sounding like a B word every appointment or annoying. But I didn't really care because I was like, I need you to figure this out because I feel like a crazy person. Advocacy doesn't require perfection, it requires care. Even when your voice shakes, it still counts. You're doing great. We'll see you next time.
Bye.